And that is what you'd consider welfare, food stamps and cash assistance. We also made the same requirement for the Division of Unemployment Assistance. Anyone getting benefits from that division we've required that the DUA verify that they're legal residents. We've also required that the Mass Scholar Grant Program verify that anyone getting a grant out of that is a legal resident. We've also required that Mass Health enroll in the federal program. I think it's called SAVE. I don't know the acronym right now, but again, it's a verification system to make sure that they're legal. We also, in an outside budget of this section of this year's budget, put a section in that any employer who violates the federal immigration laws will be barred from bidding on the contracts, state contracts in Massachusetts. And we've also included, again, in an outside section of the budget, that housing authorities have to make sure that they have proper documentation. So we've done in 6 outside sections of the budget, we've required all these agencies to verify that they're legal residents. Does that cover everything 100%? Probably not, but there's more that we can do. But these are the big money tickets, and we've made sure that they have to be legal residents.
Same question?
And the same question, yes.
Okay. Well, again, these programs may be in place, but we just all saw, was it on television a few weeks ago, Anzatuni on the air, fully benefiting from the monies from our state that obviously haven't been cut off. So I find it's, again, another Beacon Hill. Maybe there's initiatives to do it, but really where's the success? It seems to be a failure. I think that we need to obviously redress the issue of making sure that these monies aren't available in the state. I understand that the federal government should be in control of making sure our borders are protected and for reasons beyond just security, but also for the economy. But the state has to make sure that we address and stop the funding and become a sort of a red carpet for illegal immigrants to come to this state and try to basically then establish residency. It's the wrong thing to do, and we need to continue to push, I think, harder.
Kevin, if I may on that.
You have 1 minute.
Just to stress one word, these are not initiatives that I just described. These were all codified in the budget, and they are law. Now, have they all been fully implemented? I mean, no, we just finished, obviously, the budget July 31st. Each of these agencies have to do it. But, if you want to attack the legislature passed these. I mean, these are law. So now the agencies have to go forth and enforce it. And if they don't, then the legislature will have to then go back. But these aren't policies that have been in place or enacted or codified years ago. This just happened this summer. So the legislature did exactly what you're asking for. And now the agencies have to follow through on the statutes and the outside sections that we have codified.
You have 1 minute.
Oh, well, if Beacon Hill's been so successful with everything they enact, then obviously we shouldn't be in the financial crisis that we're in. So again, I'll get up to the State House and make sure that we not only enact these things, but make sure they're enforced as well.
If I may.
Do you need 30 seconds?
Absolutely,
30
just
seconds.
quickly. To sort of blame the economic situation of Massachusetts on the legislature is ignoring the last 3 years in this country, in this world. We are in an economic recession. Every state is struggling, and in fact, Massachusetts is in a better position now than many. But to somehow blame the fiscal woes right now in this state on the legislature is really putting your head in the sand, Geoff.
Okay. Geoff, you get 30 seconds if you want to rebuttal.
I know you mentioned, I think last time you said I wasn't living in reality, so whatever you want to say to obviously insult how I feel, but I know what reality is. Reality is, Hancock Street in Abington, it's Rayner Ave in Whitman, it's West Union Street in East Bridgewater. It's people that I've gone door to door with, talked to, seen them out of work, knowing that this state has not done what it's supposed to do to make sure that the economy is better, and that we have not gotten money back to our towns to make sure that teachers, police, firefighters know that they're going to have jobs every year. So you can tell me that I'm wrong all you want, but look at Beacon Hill. We are not in any better position because of what they've done, and to defend them, I guess that's your job. I'm not.
Geoff, I'm not defending.
Another 30 seconds.
I'm not defending Beacon Hill. I'm just trying to talk the situation, Geoff. And if you want to sit here and just attack Massachusetts, that's fine. Clearly, there's a lot that needs to be done, and I'm not denying that. And clearly, there's been problems. And in fact, we've addressed a lot of those. There's been ethical problems. We did ethical reform. There was pension abuses. We did pension reform to address those abuses. There was a lot of waste and inefficiencies in transportation. We did transportation reform. So we're doing that. But no, I'm not sitting here and telling you everything's all perfect up on Beacon Hill. But to sit here and just to bash Massachusetts and ignore the difficulties in all other states in this nation is simply unrealistic.
Okay, I'm not bashing Massachusetts. I am trying to make sure that we do the right thing for Massachusetts for the future. To try to villainize me, I think, is obviously what you'd like to do. It's not going going to work. The other thing, too, is you talk about ethics reform. Look at the ethics reform that you put into place. I took one of the ethics reform tests. It was surface level things. You did a 25 question test that you couldn't get wrong, and one of the questions on the test, I think I've got it right here, right. May you accept a $100 bill from a test taker to ensure that his test receives a grade of 75? I mean, this is like grade school tests that you put in place and are touting as major ethics reform. It's surface level.
Jeff, how much of the bill was that test? What are the other parts of that bill? The other parts of the reform in that ethics bill, the stricter requirements on lobbyists, the broader definition of who lobbyists are, the banning of gifts to all public employees. I mean, Jeff, you point to a test, but yes, that test goes to all municipal employees in every single position. So we're not trying to dumb down anything, but there are some basic points that a test like that conveys to people. But the test is a minor part of it. The bigger part is what we did in the other parts of the bill.
Okay. You all set?
Well, I just think also auditing the legislature. I know you've got to vote. You want to see it. You've got to vote against auditing the legislature. I know that's something that would create better transparency, and I think help people feel that they can trust their government.
Briefly, this year for the first
Shall we
time,
wrap it up?
in the budget for the first time in terms of transparency, we required that A&F put everything online in terms of a website, in terms of every expenditure and every spending. So we addressed that, and we have created the transparency on the budget. We've required A&F to do it, and they've got to follow through on that.
Right, let's move on to the next question, shall we? This one will go to Geoff is next. Both of you will be able to answer the question, and that is, next year's budget is being forecast to be a possibly $2 billion deficit with about $550 million in the stabilization of rainy day fund. What cuts would you support to balance the budget but not harm public safety or education? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, like I said, let's go right back to my plan of making local aid a fully funded mandate that's in the budget, not discretionary spending. And I'm not talking about Chapter 70, I'm talking about local aid, making sure that's taken care of first and foremost so that you don't affect the police, the firefighters, and the school teachers. You treat them with respect and make sure that they don't have to worry about their jobs every year, which is what happens, and it makes town hall in 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts a nightmare every year because everybody gets suspicious and there's a lot of infighting in every town. So let's make sure that that's done first. And then as far as cuts, I think that there's a lot of things you can do. Reform the Pacheco law so that you can increase the threshold for state contracting on construction. There's surplus land. Again, I'll go back to the Perry Amendment too. And I know Alan doesn't believe this figure, but I've got a documentation from this group called FAIR, which is that talks about the cost to each state, $1.9 billion potentially if we can cut the cost to illegal immigrants. So those are some of the things that I see as potential cuts right off the bat.
Sure.
You need to reread the question, you all set?
No, but I got to address, first and foremost, in terms of what Jeff's saying about local aid. Jeff, Chapter 70 is local aid. Local aid is comprised of two things. Chapter 70 local aid and unrestricted government aid, the two of them. Chapter 70 is local aid, and it is by far the largest portion of local aid, and right now the largest portion of Chapter 70 is non-discretionary. So again, just let's be very clear. Chapter 70 is local aid, and it is the biggest part of local aid. Moving forward in terms of what we should look at in terms of cuts, I mean, healthcare is the biggest place we have to seek savings. And, you know, at the town level, I think there's going to be some initiatives, and there needs to be, towards some plan design and what can we do to help the cities and towns do that and save it. Broader base in terms of healthcare, we have to figure out ways to drive down healthcare costs. That's not a one-year solution, unfortunately, but we have to do that. And unfortunately, we're going to have to try to create greater efficiencies and reforms in the government because, you know, at this point, people are struggling, people are hurting. We're not going to find any new revenues, I don't believe. Obviously, there could be a federal stimulus money, but we can't count on that. And like you say, Kevin, you know, our rainy day fund is down from $2.3 billion to $500 million, so we just don't have that there. Next year is going to be a very scary year, and again, it's about keep cutting, and try to be creative in terms of efficiencies.
1 minute rebuttal?
Yeah, I don't need to be lectured on Chapter 70 being part of local aid. I understand that. But when there's firefighters, there's police, and there's town employees that have had to take pay freezes or adjust their contracts, their union contracts, those people also want to make sure that their salaries aren't dependent on discretionary spending. And that's what it is called. Local aid is listed as discretionary spending. You don't seem to want to say that, but that's what it is.
Okay. If I can just ask Jeff, does he agree that Chapter 70 is non-discretionary?
I absolutely stipulate. There's no question that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about...
Okay. But Jeff, it's interrelated because obviously the ability for a town to manage its budget and how much they can pay the different groups in towns, whether it be police, fire, whatever, depends on how much Chapter 70 they get, obviously. And there's no difference here in terms of local aid's important. We know that. It's about what can we do. And in terms of you saying you want to make it a mandate and the first thing you have to do, well, Geoff, the fact of the matter is, as towns do, we base our budgets on what are the expected revenues coming in. And 2 years ago, if you sit there and you put a figure out there saying this is the local aid we're going to give you in January, and then that cliff fell off, and capital gains went down and everything fell out, that number would have been a number the town built on and couldn't count on, and it would have devastated the town even worse than the cuts that they did. So you try to do your best, you balance your budget on the numbers that you have, and you fight as hard as you can for your towns. And believe me, local aid is just as important to me, but you have to understand how it's all operating here, and Chapter 70 is the largest component of local aid for our cities and towns right now.
Right.
30-second rebuttal.
Exactly. And so I think what everybody should understand in their hearing is Beacon Hill doesn't have the will to make sure that local aid is the first thing taken care of. They just want to make sure that all the other spending, the pet projects and things like that are taken care of first. In local aid, we have to wait until the end of the budget season to find out what our numbers are going to be. You put it first. I know it's going to be difficult, and let's have those debates at the State House to talk about what other things should be cut. But make local aid first funded fully.
If I could,
You've got
Kevin.
30, last 30.
During my first 2 years in office, Geoff, we actually did joint local aid statements between the House and Senate. So we actually did provide the numbers to the towns early, okay, which again was going outside the normal process. I didn't understand why for years it hadn't been done. When in 2009, when it crashed, we couldn't do that. Last year, we provided a joint local aid statement to the towns, which told them this is the bottom, the floor that you're going to get. So in 3 out of the 4 years I've been up there, we've given the towns that certainty that they've had. It's not the numbers that we want to give them, but we have given them that certainty that you're talking about.
So are you saying that you wouldn't vote to make local aid a fully funded mandate in the budget first, is what you're saying?
Geoff, because no, every year is different, but every year that I can, I would make a joint local aid statement a priority. I've made it a priority every year, but again, learning from specifically what happened when it collapsed, that number, if we put it out front, would have been meaningless and more painful to the towns that they planned on it.
We want to thank everybody who is watching right now. You are currently watching a little debate between the incumbent Democrat Alan McCarthy and Republican challenger Geoff Diehl. They are vying for the 7th Plymouth District State Reps seat, and we're going to take our next question to Mr. Graber, and this will go to Mr. McCarthy.
Sure. We've been talking a little bit about, both of you guys have been talking sort of about the culture on Beacon Hill, and I'm curious how you both feel, especially whereas I believe, I know Mr. Diehl has a private business, I believe Mr. McCarthy has a private practice law firm on the side, and Massachusetts has technically a part-time legislature, and but if you look at some of those numbers, the salaries don't always seem part-time, and I know it's an issue that comes up from time to time, so I'd like to hear how both of your views are on the whole idea of a part-time legislature, and also some of the perks that the legislatures get, things like per diems for travel, and some of those other things, if those things that you think are valuable, if there's something that maybe we could look at in terms of a reform.
Sure. Is that to me?
2 minutes, yeah.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I mean, I know it's technically called the part-time legislature because they I guess, log the hours of when we're technically in session. But anyone that knows what a state rep does or knows involved, that's not the full-time. I mean, that's not the full picture. It's a full-time job. It really is. I mean, you are out there, you're meeting with constituents, you're working on issues, you're in session, but not when you're not in session, you're obviously studying the bills. You're studying 6,000 to 8,000 bills that are filed. Some of them are meaningless. You don't have to study very much, but there's a lot of work to be done with it. So I don't view it as a part-time position. I still practice on the side, but that's my very, very small part-time job. I mean, a state rep to me is a full-time job because it takes that type of commitment in the role that we have it right now. Because when you're dealing with 40,000 people, 3 full complete towns, that's a lot of work to do, and I pride myself in the work that I do. The constituent services is an enormous part of the job, and unfortunately, really during the recession, it's even blossomed even more. So there's a lot of work to be done. So I don't view the job just as when I'm in session. Obviously, that's very important because those are the votes that we take, but there's so much to it than that. In terms of some of the perks, I mean, well, I'm proud to say I've never taken a per diem. I mean, the per diem is obviously the travel allowance that a representative can take, and a lot do take them. When I started in the legislature, I was working at a firm in Boston, and I just didn't feel it was appropriate, and since then I've never taken a per diem, and that's thousands of dollars. So could there be some, but let me say this though, but I also don't begrudge ones that are traveling from west that take the per diem, because obviously it can be pretty expensive. So as to that, I mean, I don't take it, so I don't have much to comment on that per diem itself.